Hello and welcome back, and today we want to look at the difference between the software on the brand new DS920 Plus and the brand new QNAP TS920 These are two NASs that retail right now for approximately 850 to 900 quid shopping around, and both of these devices do arrive with a very similar hardware architecture. However, they both have very different GUI and software on board. So although this is a comparison of these two NASs, in a more broader sense, this is about DSM 6.2, which is arriving on the Synology Disk Station Manager, and QuTS Hero, that's arriving on the QNAP, their newer version of their operating system and software user interface. Now, it's worth highlighting straight away that both of these systems, as mentioned, have very similar hardware. If we go into the control panel of both of them, we'll be able to see, looking at the hardware information on both devices. If we go into the hardware, sorry, it's been a little while there. If we go there, go down into the system status, we can find out more information about the hardware inside them. And as you can see, both of them arrive with, I've got the wrong window, on the QNAP we have got the Ryzen embedded V1500B, and the same goes here on the Synology. Although it is worth highlighting that the QNAP is running on 16 gigabytes of memory, and I'm running only 4 gig of memory on the Synology. Now, the reason I'm doing that is this is the pre-built model that was sent to me as a review sample, and I could remove some of that memory, but I will highlight at times where the memory distinction is between them. So consequently, that needs to be highlighted early doors. It's the same CPU, but there's more memory on this QNAP. By default, the Synology arrives with 4 gig of DDR4 ECC memory that can be upgraded up to 32 gig, and the QNAP arrives with 8 gig of DDR4 non-ECC memory that can be upgraded up to 32 gig. It's also worth highlighting that previously we have done tests with ECC memory on this QNAP, and this QNAP was able to identify and utilize the ECC memory being recognized in the back end BIOS when we accessed it via the back end. So this is both of our systems that we're utilizing, and both of them, if we go into the storage managers, we're able to see that in the storage manager both of them have got a very similar storage makeup. They're both running 3 disks of storage in a main storage pool. If we go into the disks in both of them are running a 3-disk HGST 10TB setup with 2 drives for caching. Now, in the case of the Synology, I'm using their very own SMV 3400 SSDs, and in the QNAP, I am using for caching down here a couple of WD SSDs. Actually no, these are Kingston. I do apologise, I should have remembered that there. How terribly remiss of me. They're on screen there. Kingston Enterprise class SATA SSDs. So between the two systems, the Synology has obviously got NVMe SSD caching there in the background, and I am utilising just SATA SSD on the QNAP, but it has more memory. So between the two of them, that may affect our results. Sorry for the long intro. I'm not going to mention most of this in follow-up videos, but today I want to talk about the GUI. Future videos, I am going to be looking at their respective surveillance handling with 2 cameras in a surveillance environment. I'm also going to be looking, let's remove the VM now, I'm going to be looking at VMs in a coming video soon on both of these systems, seeing how they both handle a Windows 10 VM on their respective hardware, because it's the same CPU, and of course photo and multimedia as well as backup tiering. But for today, I want to look at the kind of graphical user interface that we have here on DSM on the left and QuTS Hero on the right. I want to look at the storage and snapshots too, and the control panel, and ultimately give you guys an understanding about how these two companies have approached their own software and the management panels of their respective platforms. Now, both of them are on the same local area network on a 1G connection. Both of them are being accessed in Chrome on the same system. Now, it may seem a bit squished here on screen. It's the only way I can show them both. I mean, I could just full screen one of them if I chose, but by full screening one of them, it doesn't make it as easy to compare them. So just bear in mind that normally you would be looking at both of these panels full screen and the text would be a little larger, but for now I'm half screening it to make things easier. Oh, and I'm using OBS just like before to record the video. So this is what you're going to see. when logging into the device. If we log out of both of these devices, I'll show you what their respective login screens will look like. And both of them allow you to log in with user credentials, either as an admin or a created user. Both of them have got their own respective client software for Windows and Mac that allows you to search your local area network and find a NAS. This software also allows you to map a network drive very, very easily. If you've got a shared drive on your shared folder on your NAS already set up, you can make it network visible. And if you go into my PC, you can see that I've already set up a shared remote drive on my local Windows PC on the QNAP and the Synology. That took literally less than a minute to do, and it's incredibly straightforward. Now, even early doors on this client software, you're going to see an ongoing trend throughout this video between these two brands. Synology, keep it simple. Everything's very clear, everything is generally named in a far more user-friendly way, and options are quite straightforward. You want to map a drive? Go to Map Drive. But at the same time, the Synology side of things will present fewer options in its drive towards simplicity. And for those of you with even a little bit more IT knowledge, and I'm talking base level, this may become a little bit limiting down the line. It's incredibly user-friendly and it's so intuitive, but it does that at the expense of hiding a lot of the more useful and configurable options. On the QNAP side of things, again, we've got a lot more options when we right-click, mapping the network drive. We can connect to it via that backend. That's how we tested the ECC. And there's lots of other options readily available that are just not present on the Synology in its efforts to keep it simple on the client software. Now, once we log into the device, when it's on our local area network, we can go ahead and log in. Keep it signed in there, and we can have a look at the login speed as well. And again, both systems do take approximately the same amount of time to log in. It's worth highlighting again about the SSD caching on the Synology and the increased memory on the QNAP, so it makes it a bit tough to compare. I should also touch on that Synology DSM 7 that we've already tested in beta privately does log in a whole lot faster as well. It's still in beta, but that's something to maybe check out there in the future. And we will, of course, compare QuTS Hero with DSM 7 when it's out of beta, maybe even a pinch before. So this is what you see when you log in. And again, straight away, a very simple, clean desktop here from Synology. You can add applications very easily, just drag and drop, and it adds them there. But by default, the only options you will see will be those of the main core applications there for adding apps and stuff like that. Also, at the bottom right of the screen here on the Synology, you've got a bit of information about the system status, the LAN connections. If you've got multiple LANs, they'll appear there, and system resource consumption. Now, you can go into a little bit more detail, of course, add it up there or bring it back down to the bottom. And, of course, there are a full resource monitor if you dig a little deeper in here and pull up the Synology resource monitor here. Again, very clear, very straightforward, straight into the graphs there. And again, background task management there takes a few extra seconds. You can look at simultaneous connected users, run a speed limit test, but again, I wouldn't worry too much about that. Settings and all of those kind of options that are there. And again, there is that business of it being just that pinch clearer and quite straightforward, and a lot of the words are what those outside the tech industry will be a lot more drawn to. On the QNAP side of things, the desktop here is far more comparable, I believe, to that of Android, with the applications as you add them appearing here on screen. And you've got multiple screens as well. We've got QBot down here that if you need to flush the system memory, if you've got too many tasks, it can be actioned manually, although the system will flush the memory in the background automatically as needed. Now, on the screen here, you may notice a lack of resource monitor here on screen, and that's because if you go up here to this little dial, this dial will change color depending on the busyness of the system. We're in idle right now, but if we open it up, we can immediately see a lot more resource information, and it's lots of information there about firmware updates, connected users. It's all on that single screen, but it's quite intimidating. And I know on this smaller half screen it looks a lot smaller, but even on the larger screen it's still not absolutely huge. And we can zoom in, of course, but again, it's still quite compact there in the bottom of the screen. And of course, they have their own larger scale resource monitor that, if we go in, is far more analytical in its design. Now, you may already have noticed a larger amount of memory utilization. That is because the QNAP utilizes ZFS, Zettabyte File System, and that is a little bit hungrier as far as memory goes, and it's the reason why ZFS equipped QUTS Hero QNAPs arrive with more memory by default. They just need that extra bit of oomph in the memory department. And I'm going to go into why that is in a little bit more time, but you can see a bit more information about connected storage resources, but there's a lot more analytical, a lot more statistical, and a lot more information is thrown at you. And again, that is going to be a big difference between these two brands that you're going to see throughout this video series of DSM 6.2 versus QTS Hero 4.5.1. The difference between them is very, very large in terms of GUI, and that does extend even further. If we head into the control panel of both of these devices, we can immediately see the difference between them. In fact, the QNAP one is already got all of these options readily available on screen, whereas the Synology is only presenting us with 12 options by default. We can switch to advanced mode, and that does add a lot of the options, but you still have to enable them with them being hidden away. Now, creating users is very, very straightforward, just adding users or user groups here. Both systems allow you to add users very, very quickly on the fly, but even then, when you go into these tabs, there's even more tabs in between, some of which weren't on that primary menu panel. Creating users is relatively straightforward. If we go to both sides, we can create a user, we can create multiple users, or import and export users as well on the QNAP, an option that is sort of present on the Synology, but not in the same way. For example, if we go into the Advanced tab, we can have a look there, and we can configure lots of preset parameters vis-a-vis password exploration and two-step authentication, things that are available on the QNAP in a more broader sense. But at the same time, the configuration options of creating a user is a lot more detailed. You can do that import-export, but it's only import there on the Synology here. Again, creating a user does seemingly have more options on the QNAP, from creating images for these people. There's a lot more security credentials regarding passwords, with using special characters, capital letters, numbers, etc. And with the Synology, you would create a user, go all the way in, and then you can go there, create a notification, and as you go through, you assign what access that user has, what you want them to be able to use, what kind of class group user they are, what files or folders you want them to have no access to, read only so they can't edit, or read and write access if you choose, and if you want to create storage limitations for them, along with applications they can access to on each of these screens. Now you go through them and you're kind of handheld all the way through, and then you create that user, whereas on the QNAP, it's all on the one screen. So you have a look here, you've got the username on here, so we'll call them Alan, then you have to give them a password, and again, there may be limitations with regards to what you set up for password variables. Then you can add phone numbers and emails for notifications, and then from user groups, that's when you can pull these tabs down and assign them to groups, what folders they have access to, and then which applications they have access to. It's the same idea, but presented in a very different way. And QNAP have put this in all one screen, which some people will appreciate because they want to see the options, and others might not. And that is continued throughout largely the entire edifice of the control panel between these two platforms. It may seem a little bit intimidating on the QNAP, but once you get a handle on where everything is, you can create a far more bespoke and customized storage environment. That said, it would be remiss of me to say that it is user-friendly to the same degree as the Synology. It's not even a close fight. A lot of us that look at QNAP systems will often say, oh, it's not that straightforward, that's there and that's there and that's there, but that's because we've used it and we take for granted our base level understanding of this technology and IT in general and kind of the accepted norms therein. Whereas Synology doesn't seem to maintain those preconceptions and presents everything in a far more user-friendly way. Now, obviously, there are areas you just can't. Sophisticated domain security, it is nigh on impossible to make that user-friendly. It's just impossible. So they are there, and of course they are presented in that tab-like fashion, but again, cannot even try to dress that up as anything but complex. And really, if you have no technical knowledge, you shouldn't really be messing around with that stuff anyway. Now, moving from here, we can go into the storage management side of things. We're going to leave backups for another video, but if we go into the storage manager from both platforms, we can see that, again, both companies have gone a very different way. And this is an area that I genuinely believe should be more technical, it should be more analytical, and it should present more information, because storage management, although these NASes can be purchased by home users quite easily, I would argue that the management of your storage, and so it can be expanded so you can get the best possible performance versus capacity, understanding what your drives are doing in the event of failure. I want analytics. I want that ready information when I go into it. You shouldn't really be going into the storage manager more than once a month. If you're going into it more than that, there's something wrong. Because the only reason you should go into storage manager is to tweak your storage in terms of capacity or speed, or if you have a drive failure that you need to remedy. But the overview is far more simplified on the Synology, but I don't think that's a good thing, the overview of all your storage, where the overview on the QNAP may seem rather intimidating, but the ability to flick between those storage pools, which you can do on the Synology if you have multiple storage pools, and the layout of the individual drives, the SSDs in the bays, I just believe the QNAP do the storage management better. Now in DSM-7 things have been improved, but they're still very graphical, with big graphics for like drives and RAIDs, and the information's there, but you've really got to dig for it. Same goes for the QNAP in its current version. It is still graphical, but if we go into the disk area, for example, between both systems, the disk area is displayed in a drop-down list here on the Synology. With each drive, you can drop down and find out allocation, whereas on the QNAP, it is a little bit more graphical here, and in a good way, I believe. This is, for me, a good middle ground between graphical for utility's sake and graphical for user-friendly sake. You can flick between the different RAID groups, you can action very easily here, monitor disk health and get disk information, as well as a lot of these options up here. There's a lot being thrown at you, it has to be said, but at the same time, in storage management, I think that's okay. If we go into cache acceleration between the two of them, things are a little bit more even-fielded here, with both of them providing the nice, easy UI of seeing that SSD acceleration is available, as well as the individual storage areas, but you definitely see a lot more information at a glance here on the QNAP side than you do on the Synology. You have to kind of rely on these green squares of cache hit rates being relevant and a good indicator that they are working. And again, we are seeing analytical improvements on Synology's DSM-7 platform with Active Insight, but that's not here, is it? So we can't really include it in this comparison. Now, the storage pools is another area where I think QNAP have done a very good job here, and specifically on this system with QuTS Hero, because QuTS Hero has a lot of the benefits of ZFS. It has inline compression, it has inline deduplication, and although the Synology takes advantage of BTRFS with file self-healing, with shared folder creation and duplication being a great deal faster, and of course lower resource consumption on snapshots, which is always desirable, it has to be said that inline data deduplication and compression, so compression file sizes are massively compressed on the fly, and at the same time with deduplication, files that are identical in multiple sources being backed up to the NAS will only be saved once rather than multiple, and then a record is kept of where they all live, you can have a look and find out just how much space is being saved on this system thanks to compression and deduplication. If we go to the bottom here, that we did a whole overview of this, showing that we did 10 identical copies of the same 275 gigabytes of data to this NAS, as you see here in this 2.68 terabyte folder, and we have managed, after compression, to bring it down to 2.19 terabytes, almost half a terabyte saved, which is pretty impressive, and these can all be enabled and disabled very quickly at the touch of a button. There's even information about what compression is and deduplication is, as well as statistical information that shows you data being saved in real time over a period of time that you display. There's a huge amount of information here, and full credit to QNAP here, involving a lot of that hardware information. Now, let's not slag off the storage manager on Synology that much. It is very intuitive, it's very user-friendly, and it gives you the right information immediately. It just doesn't seemingly provide that information in a way that a more techie equipped person is going to like. And that goes down to certain features that are coming in DSM-7 that aren't quite ready yet, such as hybrid share, the ability to bolt on shared cloud storage from the likes of Synology C2 and give it the appearance of localized storage. However, QNAP have already got that in hybrid mount, the ability to add storage from cloud services, and that's all cloud services, the traditional ones, Google Drive, Dropbox and more, and give them the appearance of localized storage to synchronize with, and that extends to G Suite and Office 365 too. Likewise, you can do the reverse thanks to the cloud gateway and create a virtual JBOD, which is where an area of storage on your NAS that you pre-allocate will allow you to bolt it onto as a blob for third-party cloud services, and again, Amazon, AWS, Azure, that sort of thing, or add it to another NAS as an area of JBOD storage for it to absorb locally. It's incredibly well adapted there. Of course, there are lots of applications on both of them, and I will be going into a lot more detail on these application services later on. Both platforms have a lot of apps that are ready to install that we're going to be looking at, to do with multimedia, to do with business and backups, to do with virtualization and surveillance. But I think this is enough for us talking about the GUI and storage management on both of these platforms. We could spend a bit more time looking at FileStation, but I think that's going to be coming up on both of these platforms throughout the other videos. But as you can already see just at a glance, lots more information is thrown at you on the QNAP than on the Synology. Whether you like that or not, that's really about you, the buyer. The little cache acceleration icons are quite nice, and of course added shared folders will be listed here on the QNAP. The Synology does involve a lot of these features and keeps things incredibly tight, incredibly simple, and very, very easy on the eye. And with benefits like Synology Drive in the background, there is a lot to be said here for the way Synology have presented this. I'm just concerned that a more techie-minded person may find it a little bit limiting, or for QNAP, the more newbie to the field of NAS or data storage or IT novice are going to look at the QNAP platform and be absolutely terrified. But we'll leave things here. Next up, we're going to be looking at the backup systems on these devices, so do stay tuned for that. But otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. There's lots of information about the reviews I've done on both these units and software comparisons too in the comments. Check those out. But otherwise, click like if you've enjoyed the video, click subscribe to learn more, and I'll see you next time.